I want to thank you, first of all, for being here, and just let you know that my main goal for today's presentation is, number one, for you to enjoy it, but number two, I want you to be able to learn something about yourself that you maybe didn't already know. And I would like that experience to, again, tie back to number one, enjoy it. And you like it and you go, you know, this is really cool. Like, what all can I learn about me? Who am I? What can I do like better than anyone else? What are my strengths and weaknesses? I want you to like learning about yourself the same way you like learning about anything that you already like, whether it's piano, whether it's your car, whether it's a sport or anything at all. I want you to have that same passion and intensity for your own self, because at the end of the day, the number one person you always have to sleep next to at night is yourself. And if you don't like yourself and you aren't super passionate about yourself, you'll find that all the other things that you really are driven to and drive to, succeed in life aren't quite as fun and necessary when you can't tie them to your own being. You want to be always all in. Have they seen Don Quixote? Don Quixote, lots of really good passion in that. That's what you want. So that's my main goals for today. That's my agenda. And so in terms of the plan for today, I'm going to go over the history of Myers-Briggs, just a brief history, some interesting facts that aren't in your book. I'm going to respond to the common criticisms, because if you don't believe in any of the stuff that I'm about to be talking about, it's not going to hit with you really. There's a lot of people who just think, oh, it's kind of vague stuff. They kind of just gloss over it so that anyone can relate to it. I'm not really that deep into psychology. I want to address that. I want to really dig deep into that. Then we're going to get in the meat potatoes, which is exploring your particular function stacks. Again, you should have that one sheet that has the bubbles on it, and it has your 4 letters at the top. That's what we'll be going into there. And then the last part, we're just going to open the floor. You can ask me anything you want about your type, about what it means, my type, anything at all. So diving into the history, everything that we're going to be talking about today is based on the works of one guy, and his name is Carl Jung. He is a Swiss psychiatrist, psychologist, anthropologist, historian, religious study guy. He's just a massive nerd, but he's known for psychology. And he wrote 1 million books on it, so many that whenever people try to condense them, they're 20 volumes long. And he was a therapist who would sit down with his client and literally just talk with them for 2 hours straight and get to know everything about them, because he was primarily concerned about the well-being of his patients. Interestingly enough, he caught the attention of none other than Sigmund Freud, and they became actually rivals. And Jung, of course, was considered that a huge honor because he considered Freud a really big member of the psychological community. And they had a very interesting rivalry. Now, then World War II happened. All right. So in the middle of the war, there were 2 women, Catherine and Isabel Briggs. Isabel eventually married, and her last name was changed to Myers. And during the war, they were originally just doing stuff like latrine duty, cooking, all the nonsense stuff, and they didn't like it because they were way smarter than that, and they wanted to apply their talents elsewhere. At this point, the way we sorted platoons in World War II was we did aptitude tests. All right, we would see how good you were at the range. We would see how smart you were with mechanics and basic, battle strategy, and then we'd sort you based on that. Isabel, in particular, hated that system and found that job satisfaction reportings were abysmal. Everyone hated their boss. Everyone hated the people underneath them. And you had a giant mishmash of people with conflicting personalities. All right, there were people who were leading everything who didn't want to have anyone look at them because they were really scared and introverted and would rather have been working behind the scenes, and vice versa. And so what she decided to come up with was, she was a big fan of all of Jung's books. And then she decided to take all of his books, that 20-something volumes earlier, and try to condense it into the test that you have taken, the 4-letter Myers-Briggs personality type indicator test. That was a tremendous feat, and a lot of stuff slipped through the cracks, but still, it worked. All the reports and statuses from the military went up. Just a lot of cohesion existed. Lives were saved because we were able to just sort people out better and have people work as collective units based on their personalities instead of their skill sets. And to this day, the CIA and other departments are still using the form of the test. Not the test that you took. They're digging a little bit deeper than that. And that's going to lead into the criticisms that we'll be going into later. And fun fact, the Office of Strategic Services came to Isabel Briggs and asked her, hey, what did you come up with? What was your inspiration for this? And when she told them about Carl Jung, they hunted him down and they found him and recruited him for the OSS. And they even had him write a psychoanalytic profile of Adolf Hitler that is still to this day classified. I want to get my hands on it, but yeah, anyway. So that is how much they cared. So if they cared this much, and this thing is just so cool and amazing, why this hate mail from the mainstream internet? You go anywhere. I picked Wikipedia because it's the most mainstream thing everyone looks at. We have often classified as pseudoscience, significant psychometric deficiencies, poor validity, poor reliability. It measures stuff that isn't independent. We have all of this hate mail here. And what I would like to do is address the hate mail today and explain why it's there and also how it's overcome by Myers-Briggs itself and why you shouldn't just dismiss the entire field itself. First of all, about that last point in particular about how it measures categories that are not independent. Yeah, on your sheet of paper, you have the I and the E, at the top. And you might be thinking to yourself, well, listen, I'm not an introvert or an extrovert. Nobody is. I have a mix of both. I have modes that I switch into or out of. Yes, Jung completely agreed with you. He completely said that like all the time, that everyone is a mix of both introversion and extroversion. It's just that the fast food kind of versions of Myers-Briggs that you see on the internet just kind of try to condense things down and make things a lot simpler because, again, Jung would sit you down and talk to you for like 2 hours about who you were, and he could get all the nitty-gritty details in. The internet test can't do that, especially when it's the middle of World War II and we're trying to get you out on the battlefield. We're giving you the quick rundown version. That test that they used in World War II was published in 1957. We haven't changed it, except for like one tiny detail that we added in like the 2000s, which is the 5th letter. Everything else is straight from World War II. It's just the same stuff. So yeah, there's going to be a lot of clips, scratches in it because we turned the books into the movie. But at the end of the day, Jung knows that you are an introvert and extrovert. And your chart, if you look at the function bubbles, there's this introverted side and this extroverted side. And you'll notice that you have stuff on both sides of that sheet. You're going to be part introvert, part extrovert. So Myers-Briggs doesn't ever claim to just lock people in these boxes. I already went into this one. It changes with your mood. Yes. But so do you. Your personality and your behavior will change with your mood. All right. If you just had a critical death in the family, or if you have just gone through a really nasty breakup, you are not going to be as extroverted and happy-go-lucky and improvisational as you normally are. And vice versa. If you've had a million things going amazing in your life, you might feel more comfortable trying things outside your comfort zone and breaking from your routines. So that's healthy in my opinion. And in terms of it's not useful, I personally disagree, and I hope that by the time we're finished with the presentation, everyone will find that it's just a really interesting way to dive into yourself and learn more about yourself. So in terms of what actually is on your sheets of paper, because I gave you a bunch here, the basic premise behind what we're working with is that in all of Carl Jung's books, he made a really bold statement. They tell you to stay away from always or never. Okay, Jung, this was his always statement. Whenever you're trying to solve a problem, any human being in the whole wide world, if you're trying to think something out or solve a problem or plan something, you're going to use a combination of 8 questions. And these same 8 questions appear throughout your entire day. All right, you may not ask every single question for that one problem. You might do the first one and then stop, But he said that these 8 questions make up the entire foundation of your ability to function as a human being. The questions are, what is going to happen? What could happen? What has happened? What is happening right now? What makes this happen? What makes this better? What does that matter to me? And what does that matter to other people? All right. Variations of these 8 questions are essentially you, as a human being and how you function. That's what makes us human. But the order in which you ask these questions and why determines your personality. That was what Jung said. And so all those 8 questions I just listed off, that is what this is. This handout right here, the slide that we're on here, this asks those 8 questions and their variations of it. So those are what Jung called the cognitive functions. And they each have their own little nickname that is useful for reading on this chart here. And you will each have one of these here. That'll be the piece of paper that has your specific type on it when you took the test. And then lastly, this is how that stack is read. This is how you read it. Essentially, the stuff you use at the top is typically regarded as the stuff you're more proficient in, and the stuff at the bottom is the stuff that you like to rely on the least. It's typically, this top one is the first question you'll ask, and this 8th one is typically the last question you want to ask. And so now, what we're going to go into is essentially what all of those functions mean and how you might apply them in your own daily life, starting with the actual roles. So whatever you have at the top of your specific stack, whatever's your number 1, that's called your hero function. The reason it's called your hero function is because it's the thing that comes so naturally to you. It's the thing you use all the time. It defines a key part of your personality. It's one of the first things people notice in you. And something unique about it is that if you ever fail to ask this question, or if you ask this question and get the wrong answer, it doesn't slow you down. You're not scared of failure. You'll keep trying over and over again. The second one, that'll be your second biggest bubble, and the number 2 on your sheet of paper is the parent function. All right, this is also something you're proficient in, but also uniquely, it's the very first thing that you employ whenever you're trying to solve someone else's problem, in addition to your own. The third is your relief function. Plain and simple, it's what you do for fun. It's a hobby, gives you energy, something you explore when you start becoming a teenager and start entering into early adulthood maturity. And your 4 is your inferior or aspirational function. This is probably one of the most important functions in the entire list. It's your goal. It is something that you aspire to be, but that you start off being very inferior at. And Jung stated that oftentimes we are so inferior in this function when we are first, becoming into like late teens, that we look up to and aspire to or hate people that get the function in this slot naturally. And you have this desire to improve in this particular area. And you are jealous of or love people who it just comes naturally to them. Now on the number 5, on the sheet, it starts off with those bubbles. It goes the bigger one, then the second bigger one, and it goes down. Now you go back up the top again. This is your argumentative function. This is how you argue against other people, plain and simple. It's the first question you ask whenever you're trying to tear someone else's idea apart. 6th one is the critical parent function. This is how you argue against yourself. This is the voice that kicks you in your head and tells you that you made a mistake, your conscience. 7 is trickster. This one's complicated. It's basically how you lie to yourself, how you lie to other people, what kind of things you hide from yourself, questions that you have difficulty asking because you don't like the answers. And last but not least, demonic function. It is how you hurt yourself or hurt other people. It is you in your fight or flight, angriest mode. It's the question that you are either focused on or refuse to confront, depending on what's in your 8th function stack. And so each of those are the roles, and now I'm going to go over the specific questions and what those might mean and why it means what they're at in your particular stack. So starting with anyone who has introverted intuition very high, if yours is NI, or it's on a lot of your sheets, it's the yellow bubble, and it will be in the top left. That is what is going to happen. People who have that very high in their stack tend to have really solid gut instincts about what they believe. They have stronger convictions, and they tend to start there and work their way backwards from it to achieve their goals. They're very long-term oriented. They have like visions essentially of like what they want for themselves for the future. There's a specific example that Jung actually used when he was just applying each of these in a context. The question, what am I going to wear? So someone with high introverted intuition, whenever they ask themselves that question, they imagine themselves in different outfits and envision themselves playing that role or that persona. So up next, we have extroverted intuition. If you're high in that, that's the question that asks what could happen. Brainstormy, bouncy, jumpy, connecting patterns between things that don't really seem like they're connected at all, moving seamlessly from one idea to another. People high in this function are people who could be like inventors, or like people who are able to like string together different arguments, and just they're hard to overwhelm because they themselves are kind of overwhelming a lot of times. Someone who is dominant in this function, who asks, what am I going to wear today? They might think about how other people communicate or perceive that is what they're wearing. So might say, oh, this is an archetype of businessman. This is an archetype of I'm relaxed today. They think about like what it could mean like to lots of different people. Introverted sensing, what happened in the past and how is that relevant to this? It's tied to memory, core like memory motor function. It has a sense of tradition, order, law. People high in this function like routines. They like closing loose ends, and they can be sentimental. When dressing themselves, they probably ask themselves, you know, when is the last time I wore this? I remember, what did I feel when I was wearing this? Is this like, what does this mean like in terms of my past? And maybe how does that make me feel? Next up, extroverted sensing. Very common in athletes. Very just, if you've ever seen a Clint Eastwood movie, you know how the protagonist just takes a deep breath and then sighs and reaches for a gun and just does something really quickly. It's a lot of that. It's just focusing on the present, clearing your mind, relaxing. People who have this very high in their stack tend to be able to just see present opportunities in the moment and kind of focus on that. People who have this extremely low in the stack can get caught up in their head in other things or places that are not the present moment. So someone who has high extroverted sensing, with that closed example, you might say to yourself, I'm just going to try on a bunch of different stuff, just see what I like, get a feel for what's available. Introverted thinking, why is this happening the way this is? It's analytical. It's a lot like a detective. It wants to take a bunch of information and then break it down into its tiniest possible pieces to see what works, why, what doesn't work. It has the danger of getting analysis paralysis, where you kind of get stuck just like examining things for so long without making the final conclusion, but yet it is an excellent information gatherer, and it can bring out details that other people might miss. It understands what things can mean in that regard, and it understands like rules and logic. So for instance, someone with high TI, when they're dressing themselves, they might look at their wardrobe and go, okay, red is a power color. Blue is more calm, relaxed. So is green, stuff like that. TE, extroverted thinking. How do I make this better or more efficient? All right. If TI is kind of an inward head process, kind of taking things apart and making sense of it for yourself, TE is making sense of it in the outer world. People with high in TE, they think out loud, they are efficient, they don't like nonsense, they can sometimes be a little bit more emotionally not focused on that at all, more focused on the efficiency of something than the emotions behind it. They like organization. And someone, using the dress example there, they focus on utility. So they might say, well, if I'm going to be wearing this, I'm going to be standing all day. So I'm going to want to wear this because this is more comfy. Or I'm going to be moving around, so I'm going to need this. Utility. FI, how do I feel about this? This is a function that's really centered on personal values, ethics, morals. You're going to be thinking about the authentic self. What is true to me? It's focused on being able to be emotionally in tune with yourself. And so someone high in this function might decide on an outfit based purely on, this just feels right. This is me. I understand this. And then lastly, for extroverted feeling, it's responsible for empathy, social cues, social situations. People high in this are often more extroverted types, or at least types that want to go with the flow and like help facilitate positive communication. They would ask themselves in the clothing scenario, well, for this type of function, I should be wearing this. This is what other people would want. What would make them feel comfortable? What makes it fits in with the social dynamic? And that essentially covers the 8 functions that are in your stack and the placements that they would be in. So you might be wondering like what it all means like in the big picture. And essentially, the idea is that you can now dissect yourself with all this information. You can look and see, okay, what is my number one? Is that really me? Is that something that just comes naturally to me? Do I have a lot of skill in this? Do I enjoy this? And then look at your own number 8 and then see what that's tied to and say, oh man, am I someone who's, I really don't like have a lot of skill in this area. I really just don't like handling with these types of situations. I prefer these types instead. And then you just work with that and get the momentum rolling and get a full profile for yourself. And once you do that, Jung said that that is an idea that helps you self-actualize. He believed in what he called objective consciousness, this idea that you have an existence and that the more comfortable you are in it, the happier and healthier you are. The more you address yourself and the world around you, the more aware you are. If anyone's fans of Abraham Maslow, the hierarchy of needs, Jung and Maslow have a lot of overlap in terms of how you like grow as a person, in terms of how you self-actualize. And so, with this in mind, with all of the info that I was, swarmed at you, I want to hear your thoughts. You can ask me literally anything about your chart, about what you think about Myers-Briggs, about how the letters work, the 4 letters, anything, history, all of it. We're opening the floor up to questions. We'll have some on Zoom. If we want to start with those while you think of any. So.
I don't have no questions yet.
No questions on Zoom? Yeah.
Go ahead.
Erica, yeah.
Has yours ever flipped or has it stayed the same?
Mine has stayed the same, but flipping is actually normal. And if I recall, I know a lot of people who have flipped. And the idea of it is, there are 2 explanations that I would think for why a type would flip. Number 1 is the test originally was just kind of a faulty run. Again, back to the very beginning when I said this was made in World War II, and this was just designed to be a quick, knee-jerk reaction to just kind of separate people based on personality. They took the book into the movie per se. That's the first reason your type can change, is just because something might have just been error in the time. In fact, Jung himself, when he found out about this test, he gave it about a 75% accuracy rating. And in my opinion, that's not a lot, but it works. The other reason for that is, in fact, I think we'll go ahead and see, there are functions that still remain high in both of those different types, for instance. So you said what, INFJ and then ENFJ? Yeah. Yep, these 2 are literally right next to each other, and they're kind of almost like flips of each other in a certain way. Like for instance, INFJ is high in introverted intuition, and ENFJ is also high in that. And as a matter of fact, they're literally 1 and 2 on both of these. Like, so if you had flipped, you honestly didn't make that huge of a jump, because your number 1 was NI, and then your number 2 was FE, and now in this, your number 1 is FE and your number 2 is NI. It literally just minor flippage. So that's a good question. If you think your type flips, don't let that make you think that the test is inaccurate or anything like that. There's lots of similarities between some of the types, and similarities between how you approach things, and you just might be in a more dominant or parental mood, depending on how you take it. So thank you very much, Erica.
On Zoom that wants to know what your Myers-Briggs.
Do they have a guess? Yeah.
You guys have a guess?
Anyone who wants to guess, you're free to guess. If you know it, don't say anything, but if you have a guess, just, when I say know it, I mean you know it as in you know me. Like if we've talked and hung out before, don't say it, but any guesses? Anyone on Zoom? Huh? Close. ENTJ, close. ENFP, close. Actually, but close. Yeah, literally, actually.
ENFJ was a guess on here.
ENFJ.
No, you're an INTJ, I bet. No?
No, sorry.
No, INTP.
INTP. They're also close.
Just tell us to put us up.
All right. Mine is ENTP. I am called inventor / visionary. People in my type are known for being lawyers, for being loud, for being argumentative, but also for being kind of bouncy, having lots of different ideas, lots of information. I speak faster than I should. I also, in terms of this stack, if I were to like critically analyze it here, my second is TI, which is introverted thinking. Whenever I make a decision, I make it alone, even though I love to gather information with my extroverted intuition, and I will spend a lot of time doing random things or random people. In fact, I have fun with people the most. That's my relief function is FE, social situations. That's my relief function. I have fun by getting up here, talking with you guys, sharing all my beliefs and stuff about the Myers-Briggs stuff, my passion. But in terms of my introversion, my TI, I make decisions alone. I kind of like, and I use that whenever I'm helping other people too. That's my parental function. So if I ever want to give advice to someone, if I want to say anything to like help them out in a situation or something, I just keep quiet until I know everything I know about them, like that I can get to know, you know what I mean? Try to dissect them with this and then offer like advice in that order. So I don't just immediately just go in my gut. A lot of times I just practice. Yes, Jessica.
What's the yellow word?
The yellow word is guardian. So
Up there.
up here,
Yeah, up there, ISFJ.
ISFJ. ISFJ is called protector or nurturer. You're high in SI. I saw you looking whenever I was going through that function, and you have also a high FE, extroverted feeling. That you have like you want to be like organized and help people. You're very caring. You often put others before yourself. One of the things that they put on the chart there is actually that you can be kind of at risk for sometimes letting people talk over you, or kind of like kind of take advantage of your kind nature. But you're an extremely like good person. You care a lot about values, society, other people. But yeah.
I know, I just tell you I hate people.
Nah. Deep down, theoretically, it could be another time. I don't know.
She is, don't listen to her. She's a caring person.
And while we're at it, in terms of the yellow words, on this slide, if you guys see on Zoom, there's the yellow part, and then there's the red part, and then the blue and the green. Jung actually had extra subcategories that he divided people into. So there was one for guardians, artisans, rationals, and idealists. And he broke those down into their ultimate goals in life. He said that some people share them. So like guardians, they want like a sense of belonging, a sense of legacy, a sense of family, purpose, achievement. Artisans want to create something. They want mastery of their outside world in one way or another. Oftentimes a physical mastery like art or a car, or just having things like the way they want them. Rationals are truth seekers. They really want hardcore facts, hardcore knowledge. They just entertain like the mental realm a lot and just kind of get lost in there, or act on it in some cases. And then the last is idealists, who are essentially really big on like a moral like compass scale, and they have like essentially visions that they want to share with the world. So if I were to break it down into like just quick one word summaries, oftentimes like politicians are rationals, or idealists, excuse me. Politicians are idealists, sciencey people are rationals. People who work with their hands a lot are artisans, and people who like really value relationships and like building those networks are guardians. So that's just a quick summary on that sheet. I believe you had one in the back.
What's the most popular and least popular?
As in like most common and least common? All right, so most common is ISFJ. They make up approximately 13% of the global population, but that's not saying a lot considering that there's 16 types. The people who are the rarest, it depends on the gender. The rarest male is an INFJ male. This one here, counselor, protector, male. And the rarest female is a tie between INTJ female and ENTJ female. So these two down here are the rarest for females. This one's the rarest for male. Most common overall for male and female is ISFJ. And also for some more breakdown, we have found that there's pretty much no correlation between thinking and feeling between men and women, which is interesting because you can still have like high social or low social priorities depending on where you land on the stack. Like for instance, INFJ males, even though they have high extroverted feeling, they often don't use it unless someone is in drastic need of it. So even times they could just come across as cold or calculated just because they're kind of like putting together the pieces of like a situation on their own. That's their dominant nature, is just to be introverted and quiet. So You never really know a ton about someone until you really start to get to know them through those 8 questions, really, I would say. Excellent.
All right, so the first one's from Brianna. She said, my personality, I can talk. My personality came out to be advocate, which is INFJ.
Excellent.
I guess my question is mentally being an introverted and outwardly introverted. What is that different? Here's her example. I do not like to socialize, but when I'm in a room, I come alive and cannot stop speaking. I have never been called introverted, but I feel like I'm a mix of both. But this one says that I am like a great amount like she's more introverted than extroverted. Whew, she was typing fast. She's laughing on the camera.
That was actually a little bit tying into that previous thing I was saying about INFJ males. So on your stack, you're going to see number 1 is your introverted intuition. That is where you get your gut feelings. That's where you get a lot of the sense of things that should be in the future whenever you're thinking or oriented in the future. But you also have really high extroverted feeling, which is your very second parental function. And essentially, your 2 functions are your hero and your parent. Those are the ones that Jung said that you were born with. That you're really excellent in. In fact, the third one, the relief one, your TI, is what you would get as a teen. And then the last one is one you develop as you become like a mature adult. So you start off, the reason why you have this flip-flop, or when you say you're very like extroverted feeling person and you just can come alive in a room, your second function, your number 2, literally the second one of the 8 is extroverted feeling, which is the function of coming alive in a room. It's focused on social cues, empathy, interacting with people, social interaction. You have that very high in your stack. That's your second slot. And at the same time, your number 1 function is introverted intuition. And that just kind of ties in with the gut feelings thing. So in that regard, it would make sense that you could be someone who has kind of a strong, attachment to both introversion or extroversion in your case when you were talking about that. So yeah, Jung believed everyone was a mix. And if you'll notice, in your chart specifically, you start off with introverted intuition, the yellow, then you go to the extroverted feeling, red, and then introverted thinking, blue, and then extroverted sensing, 4. So you literally go introvert, extrovert, like in that order. So yeah, you got that. Awesome.
All right,
Yeah.
then we have another question from Brianna, and she says, is it ideal to put the same category together in a working environment or apart?
Oh, that's a really good question. It's going to depend on the category. There are people on here that are way more stubborn than others and are way more lighthearted, go with the flow than others. ISFPs, you can pair them together all day. They get along with practically most people. ESFPs are pretty agreeable people, but keep in mind that some people that are really high on levels of extroversion might have the ability to conflict or kind of start some tension between people who are also very extroverted and stubborn. Even if they're introverted too, INTJs kind of famously don't get along with each other. So if you have a specific one, I could tell you, like if you're going for if you have a specific question on that, on who would get along with another, you can ask that as well in the chat. But in terms of generalizations, it's going to depend. There are certain people who they get along with everybody and certain people who kind of have to have things their own way in order for things to work. That's an excellent question.
Thank you. I wasn't asking as specifically, I'm actually an INTP, but I've noticed with working in groups with some people that they don't get along very well, but they seem to have the same personality. So
yeah, there are some functions that are going to be more stubborn than others. And even if they're all similar and they have like the same ways of thinking, they just might have like minor disagreements between them. I mean, for instance, I'm trying to think of one. I mean, I was going to think of 2 famous politicians who are on the left and the right who have the same type. I know Obama is ENFJ, Donald Trump is ESTP, Michelle Obama is, I believe, INFJ, so Michelle and Barack are right next to each other. Ben Shapiro is ENTP. Joe Rogan, I think ESTP, I don't know that for certain. So he's the same as Donald Trump, I believe, Joe Rogan. But again, lots of people can have the same type and disagree on very big, important issues of politics or how to get this job done, you know, and sometimes there can just be friction. But Carl Jung stated, and he made this very clear, any two types on here that are mature adults can get along with each other. Anyone who is the two mature adults will be able to get along with each other no matter what their types are. And if you're someone who's a real buff or a history buff or a movie buff, you can go throughout all of these and find all of these in stories, movies, where people of any type either get along or don't. And it's just about, you know, their journey, about learning to compromise with others. But that's an excellent question, and I appreciate that. Yes, Trey.
You know, mentioned the fifth letter that they added. Why did they add that?
I will show you, actually. So for those who didn't hear in Zoom, Trey asked about the fifth letter in Myers-Briggs and why they added it. And the reason they added it was significant psychometric deficiencies. And what they meant by that was Myers-Briggs doesn't tell you whether someone is mentally in a great spot or mentally not in a great spot right now. There are other tests that do this. For example, I think Big Five and the Enneagram tests, if you're familiar with those. Big Five has a section for, I think, like neuroticism, and then Enneagram has your stressors or your counter psycho, something, whatever. Myers-Briggs doesn't have any of that. So what they started adding recently, like in the 90s, was that fifth letter, and that's your assertiveness or turbulence. And generally speaking, there's not one that's better than the other. A lot of people might think there is, but you want kind of a healthy medium in some cases, because turbulence refers to, I check everything I do multiple times. I don't really have a lot of confidence in my ability to get things right the first time. I really want this to be perfect. I'm kind of scared I'm not capable of doing that. And they tend to be kind of people who are a little more on edge, a little more not so happy and confident in their own skin. Assertiveness, on the other hand, and if I'm maxing it out here, are people who are extremely confident to the point where they neglect, like, you know, checking things over more than once. They can be stubborn, overconfident anyway. What you want is a healthy medium. And I'm not saying that if you're like a negative 100% on turbulence or a positive 100% on assertiveness, that you're going to be hard to get along with or that you annoy people or anything. Those are just the general paintbrush strokes that Myers-Briggs tried to come up with, bless you, come up with 50 years later in order to address the general complaints with that. So yes, that is kind of the gist of the fifth letter and why it's there. Did that answer your question? Cool. Thank you, Trey.
I know he's going fast, but y'all got to have some questions. Your brains have to be swirling right now.
Any more in the Zoom? Yes.
Daniel.
For number 3 on the lead function, I had F5 as introverted feeling. What's an example of that?
Say that one more time, a little bit louder so I can type it in.
For number 3 on the stack, I have the lead function. I have FI, which is introverted feeling. And I was wondering if you could give me an example of that, how that fits in that.
So introverted feeling is responsible for the authentic self, creativity, expression. It's a function that doesn't care about what other people think. It's unapologetic. Because that's in your third slot, you would have discovered that probably in your mid to late teens or possibly earlier or later, depending on just like your general life cycle. And it's essentially a function that you use to express yourself or find a unique specific identity in things that relate to you. It doesn't necessarily care about what other people think or like social situations or stuff like that. It's more tied to you personally. So maybe I'm just taking a shot in the dark here. Circa 16 or maybe 15 or 14, you fell into some hobbies where you're able to vent out your frustrations or relax and unwind or just kind of like feel better and just happier. And these things involve maybe art or science or anything where you're able to just take something and look at it and go, yeah, I like this. This is me. This is finally, you know, I don't have to put on a mask for other people. This is who I am. That type of situation there. And you would find that typically in like teenage years.
Here's a question online. Wanting to know, does turbulence mean emotionally unstable?
In some people, yes. In some people, no. It's the letter that changes the most, responding to your mood. There are questions. When I took the test, I remember like a few years back, and I take it a lot recently. In the most recent versions, I remember there were questions there that were basically just like, how confident are you in this? How much do you trust like this particular thing? Do you feel like good about the things that you do? So in that regard, if someone answers like strongly disagree to literally all of it, then yeah, they're probably not in a happy like mental space at that particular moment. But it's not as strong an indicator as just plain like neuroticism. I'll give you an example. Charles Manson is an ENFP, very assertive, and Manson is very, you would classify him medically as unstable, but yet he scores very high on assertiveness. So assertiveness or turbulence is not always an excellent indicator of whether or not someone is in a mentally healthy headspace, if that answers your question.
Here's another one. Are there specific industries that your type is best suited for? Crystal says she's an ENFJ, so should she be a teacher? Question mark.
I mean, according to the generalizations, yeah, there's essentially, if you go on 16personalities.com, they have a whole section for this, careers and strengths and stuff like that. And what they'll list for ENFJs often is therapist, counselor, human resources department, like person, like high up in there. They're people who are very personable and are just able to kind of get a feel for how to help mentor people, how to teach people, how to help understand people and just work in those environments. I have a best friend who is actually a child psychologist in Maine, and he is an ENFJ, and he just gets a thrill out of just kind of like working directly with the kids and like learning everything about them and just helping them succeed in life. But again, that's just one person. I mean, Obama is an ENFJ, and so, you know, you can be anyone can do in any career field whatever they want, but things that come naturally to certain people are going to depend on their type typically. Does that answer the question? Is that good?
Yes, she's shaking her head, yes.
Awesome. Thank you.
Which personality types make good leaders?
All right, we're looking at, if I'm using, and again, you can find a politician or a leader or a hero with any of these types, but the most usual ones are ENTJs, ENFJs, depending on the history, INFJs, ENTPs, and there's a difference between, like, if you mean leader as in like world leader, as in like politician, or industry leaders, ESTJs and INTJs. Yep, Martin Luther King Jr. is INFJ. So it really depends on what kind of leader you're going for. If you're going for social causes, protests, that's Gandhi and Martin Luther King Jr. Those are INFJs. Politicians who are very successful, again, ENFJs. Really big business tycoons, like the kind of guy who he just kind of sat in his basement and then all of a sudden a business exploded and it became like one of the top 100 businesses in the world. INTJs. Those are your Zuckerbergs and Jeff Bezoses, INTJs. In terms of like really powerful managers or CEOs, people that do like really big like logistics oriented stuff, typically ESTJs. Yeah. Or, you said you were.
And, which one? Crystal says she's an ENFJ, but that question was from.
That was from, yeah. The person who asked this, the best leaders. That was all they asked is like, who makes best leaders?
Yeah, Destiny, what's your E, whatever it is, your code?
INFJ.
Destiny's an INFJ.
So yeah, that would be Martin Luther King, Gandhi. But don't be discouraged if yours wasn't any of the ones that I just named out, because there are tons of people in a lot of the categories who like Kanye West is ISFP, George Washington, and pretty much almost all of the founding fathers were ISTJs actually, except for Ben Franklin. Franklin was ENTP. Yeah, you can find anyone anywhere who's been a world leader of anything you can think of in all of the types. So don't feel limited or boxed in by your type. They're just kind of generalizations that you can kind of see like similarities in. But if you get into the really nitty-gritty specifics, it's how they solve problems using these functions. The first things that they do are things that they're often known for.
Okay, Georgia.
I'm ENFP, and my first number of my stack is getting the extrovert inclusion. Can you talk more about what that
Say that one more time, you're an EN what?
ENFP, and my number one is NE, extroverted intuition.
So Georgia, you and I have the same number one actually, because I'm an ENTP over here, and you and I both have extroverted intuition as our number ones. And essentially, as a number one, you for extroverted intuition, you're someone who can string together a lot of different ideas and move quickly from like one idea to another. In terms of like how you use it, I know a lot of ENFPs. A lot of them are actually musicians, and typically, you're just like, you know how to read people. One of the things that you get in ENFPs, in fact, she reminds me a little bit, is she like Maggie Marchbanks? She remind you of Maggie at all?
Mackie's a lot quieter.
A lot quieter? So a lot of times you have a good BS detector, if you would think so for yourself. You're able to, let's see. Are you confident in expressing that? Are you an ENFP turbulent or assertive? Turbulent. Okay. Extroverted intuition, ENFP turbulent. What gets you going more than anything else? What like just like, you know how like I'm going crazy right now for like Myers-Briggs, and that's kind of like a thing that I can get lost in. Do you have a lot of different things that like when you were a kid, you just jumped from immediately one to or another? Like, oh, 1 week it's this, another week it's this. And it's just like this kind of, you get bored super easily. Like you can just like, you need stimulation from anything, whether it's mental, whether it's physical, going for a run or reading a book or just anything, interacting with people. That's kind of like you kind of have this drive and energy to just like keep doing lots of different things all the time. And it looks like your relief function is TE, or extroverted thinking. And that's where you like puzzles. That's where you like here. That's how you got here. It's very oriented with logistics. And that's what extroverted thinking is oriented with. And so you like for things to be efficient, and you see that as a challenge to be able to test your skills. Because again, you want something to do. That's how I would interpret that in general, like in kind of a broad scheme. Does that help a lot? Cool, thank you.
Anybody else?
That's got a question about how the argumentative interacts with the hero that says it opposes your hero function.
Yeah.
How does it, does it really depend on what your hero function is or how your argumentative function will work?
That is true. So the way it works is your hero function is always this top bubble here. And your argumentative function is always that sliver of the bubble that falls on the other side of the hero function. And so your argumentative function is always going to be different from who you naturally are, which is kind of a bold statement that Jung used to say. He would say that we judge others and argue against others differently than how we judge ourselves. We hold ourselves to different standards than we hold other people. Not necessarily unequal standards, but standards set in different areas. So I believe yours was, you said ENFJ? No, you said you got FI in your teenage years. So you have a relief FI. So you're either ISTJ or you're INTJ. Gotcha. All right. So in that case,
My hero function is NI,
Right.
introverted intuition, and my argumentative function is NE, extroverted intuition.
So when you are, yeah, they are opposites. And so here's the dynamic there. NI is deductive reasoning, all right? It's where you make a decision, where you decide this is the future, this is what is going to happen, and now I must make steps towards it. Conversely, NE is actually the opposite. It says, what could the future be? What all can happen? What all can I do? NE, or extroverted intuition, splatters the board with possibilities. NI gets rid of all of those possibilities and reduces it to one outcome. And the best example I can think of for that is actually an interview I watched with Bezos, where it just came so naturally to him that he knew that the internet was going to change the world. He was alive like when the real foundings were happening, and he compared it, and he actually argued this at a TED Talk, that the internet was the same thing as washers and dryers. in outlets. And that might seem like a crazy, weird comparison. And that's because Bezos's argumentative function that he was using to argue at this TED Talk was extroverted intuition, which is what yours is. Bezos was using his extroverted intuition to see the patterns and explosions of all the things that can remind him of the future. And what it came down to was washers and dryers and what that implies the internet is going to be. And to give you more context on what the crap that meant, what he meant was in the time when we invented the washer and dryer, electricity was so primitive that you would literally right here on the ceiling, and for those of you who can't see it, you would have one outlet in your house in the middle ceiling of like your living room and use that outlet for everything. That was it, your lamp, your ceiling fan, but also if you wanted to use your washer dryer, you had to plug in out the lamp and then plug in the washer dryer, and then it would be sitting outside because it was so messy that it would just leak water everywhere, so you had to have that on your porch. And all of a sudden, one day, they figured out, you know what if we put outlets everywhere? Then people can have all sorts of electrical things going on in the house. And then all of a sudden, refrigerator shot up, washer dryer shot up, everything shot up immediately. And it was a boom of the electricity era and TV and radio and everything just shooting up. Bezos said that's what internet was going to be. And well, he put his money where his mouth was, and he opened up that Kindle bookshop, and then he became the richest person in the world for a little bit. So that's the idea, is he saw the future. He said, this is going to happen. NI, introverted intuition, predicting the future. Like we said here. Oh, well, man, never mind. And then he acted on it with his argumentative function, or NE, is what could happen, what could go wrong. That's why they tend to be like bigger business types who like architect an idea, is because they have their vision and they ask themselves to argue with it, what could go wrong? So I went in a lot about there, but hopefully you guys like that information about Bezos, about using that as an example. Thank you, Daniel.
Anybody else? No more questions. Go ahead. Oh, Michael, go ahead.
You know why INFJs are so rare?
Pardon?
Why are INFJs so rare?
It's the same type that Jesus had and that Adolf Hitler had. It seems to have pretty strong polarity. There's a lot going on with it. The reason it's so rare, if I had to make a guess, is first of all, any type that has introverted intuition at its top tends to be a rarer type. Again, INFJs are rare, INTs are rare in women. Yeah, those are the two that have it at the top. Yeah, those are the two rarest generally. And it's going to sound crazy, but this is a real thing. Jung, again, anthropologist, historian, also really big into religious studies, and he believed in what was called the collective unconscious. And he called NI the God function, or the ethereal function, in the sense that it dealt with things that humans can't perceive. S types, and generally sensing in general, what the S stands for is sensing, referring to your five senses. Smell, taste, touch, hear, all of that. That was people who have an S typically organize info in their head based around sensory experience. N refers to intuitive, and it's abstract thinking, and it's like patterns. So in my case, I'm really bad about, I can describe things based on how they make me feel, based on like a color or something weird. I'll describe the temperature of something. Like if I hear music, if I hear music, I might go, oh, that sounds really warm. Or that sounds really like just cold, like even though it's not, because music doesn't touch you, And so the reason introverted intuitives are more rare is because they just kind of seem to be pulling information from places that we can't find it in the physical world. People who tend to have, again, this is like Bezos and like Jesus. I'm not comparing them. I'm just saying like they have the high introverted intuition. They get conclusions first and then step their way backwards. And that's kind of not how the rest of us work. A lot of us, we have to like get information and then work our way towards the finish line. People who have that in dominant tend to start at the finish line and work backwards. So it's that's why it's more rare. It just is. It's a different way of thinking. We'll find out.
Are you INFJ?
lots of artists, Billie Eilish, and lots of people who are uncompromising about who they are. You hate fake when it's on people. You don't like it when people lie. You don't like it when people are just have this kind of brash, superficial, almost kind of psychopathic, like, hi, how are you, when they hate the other person. You want and demand from yourself and from other people the truth about who they are and what they feel. And if you have a friend who's like, well, what's your name again? Victoria, like, oh, Victoria, I need help with something, da 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 da. You do not mince words about what you think about what they want to hear. You tell them what they need to hear. There are some people who they don't have that. A lot of people, they just really want to kind of like keep moods and feelings up high. And no, I think that's a great idea. Or no, this, that, the other. And then there's people who are like, no, you need to do this. Like, this is not, and even if it starts an argument. So that's kind of the idea behind INFP there. In terms of famous people, off the top of my head, Dr. Elizabeth Doze, who works here, she is a INFP as well, and she teaches this. In fact, she got me into this in the first place. So Doze can tell you a lot about herself and INFPs. And yeah, just Billie Eilish, Doze, lots of people, it's kind of like the general scheme there is about seeking truth and internal emotional awareness. I'm bad at it. Mine is in my 7th slot. So this is something real. One time there was a questionnaire and it just asked this question, what is your favorite thing? I said, I have no idea. I have no idea. What the crap is my favorite thing? And I tried to just pour over like myself for like a few minutes. And finally I gave up and asked my mom, and she's really high on this. And I asked her, Mom, what's my favorite thing? And she said, music. I said, oh, thanks. And a lot of the times they just kind of know like how other people work, even better than they know themselves. Knowing yourself is FI. Knowing other people is FE and NE. So, hope that answered your question. Thank you, Victoria. Steven, yeah.
How does this apply, like, with, like, if you're looking to hire somebody or something, you're looking to see, like, what somebody is, or in, like, a relationship?
All right, so again, we'll start with relationships. Any two adults that are mature can be together. In fact, even ones that quote unquote, like on the internet, have low compatibility. The woman who made the test, Isabel, and her husband, she was an INFP and her husband was ISTJ, and those reportedly have like really bad like compatibility, and yet they had a happy marriage like their whole time. So again, like importance is anyone can make it at all. But there are just like knee-jerk reactions about like how people think and express these things in terms of compatibility, just in relationships or in just like friends or anything. N types typically don't get along well with S types, just because N types tend to organize information based on like an idea of something, but S's deal with the raw information. Anyone who is high in extroverted thinking typically does not go well with people who are high in extroverted feeling. And the reason why is because extroverted thinking is efficiency, and it is often rejective of emotional appeal in terms of an argument, whereas FE is all that is. All that matters is the emotion and what the person feels. What else? People who are high in SE are very improvisational and in the moment a lot of the times. People who are low in it, maybe INTJs or maybe ENTJs, maybe not so much, although there are exceptions, ENTPs. Improv is very high extroverted intuition. There's different forms of it. Okay, I've got one. An ENTP would be like, I want to try this. What the heck is this religion about? I'm going to read this holy book. Or what the heck is like, that school of field of knowledge? Well, working on an airplane, a car? Yeah, why not? Let's try this out. ESFP is more like, let's go here. Let's go here. Like you physically want to go to a place and try something out. Or let's try skydiving. And let's try this, that, and the other. So Extroverted sensing is seeking physical. Extroverted intuition is often seeking mental. But yeah, and the first part in terms of career, are you like if you're screening a candidate or something?
Yeah, like that, or if they're trying to hire you.
In the logistics field, the number one thing they want is extroverted thinking. As a matter of fact, when they did the Lowe's tour, Stephen, did you get to go to that? Were you in the cohort? Darn it. All right, never mind. All right. Sorry, I didn't think like I didn't know if there was like blend between like. All right. So the guy who does that and he runs that giant facility, ESTJ, extroverted thinking. He'll tell you about it. He even mentioned it like there, and essentially that's being able to air traffic controller, just efficiency, being able to handle like a long to-do list and time management. That's high in that. And like just being able to market that in general, that works really well in business. Anyone who's like ESTJ, ESTP, they're kind of known for being like business people more often than not, entrepreneurial types even. And yeah, are you looking for more specific or like what more broad?
Yeah, I mean, that's fine.
Yeah. Anyone can find like the qualities that are like marketable or like things that tie to their job. Again, if you Google 16 personalities test, I think they don't make you take it. You can if you want, but if you have yours and you know it's yours already, just go to like the top left and just click my type, click that, go to career. It'll give you like page summary or two.
Yeah, these guys all took the 16 personalities. That's how they know their code.
Gotcha. Cool. Yeah, there's that career section.
Any other questions? Tia?
Can you tell me why you felt the ESJ?
Yes. So intuitives tend to wear like typically one or two colors in total, and J types tend to match. People who have lots of different things in their pockets tend to be introverted thinkers. People who are on time tend to be J by far. If you're on time, you tend to have J as your fourth letter, or early J as your fourth letter. If you're later, typically P's, stands for prospectors. What else? Neat hair, layers. It was just a guess, like just from repetition. Like there's lots of people. I got Jessica's right when she came in. She was ISFJ, and typically I'm able to just try to like kind of get a feel for what someone's like dominant function is, and that's how I make my guess. I don't make my guess based on whether or not you look like a super introvert or a super extrovert. I go for what I think is your dominant and secondary functions.
What's Professor Montgomery?
I believe INTJ. Is that correct? Yeah. Oh wait, it was ISTJ. Was it ISTJ?
Huh?
You can go ahead and. All right.
You're right.
It was okay. It was ISTJ. Yep. And again, secondary function, parent function, extroverted thinking, logistics, like is literally right there in the stack. It's at the top, pretty much. And so yeah. Let's see.
Don't be trying to psychoanalyze them, Dustin.
Georgia?
You said that the creator of this quiz topic, she was an ENFP and her husband was an ISTJ.
I think she was an INFP and her husband was an ISTJ. I think.
So you said they didn't go well together and like, I'm an ENFP and my boyfriend is an ISTJ.
Opposites attract.
Yeah, she had a happy marriage. Like any two mature adults can get along, regardless of type. Anyone. Like literally, the founder of the test literally goes against like the basic like compatibility thing. So it's literally all about like that. Like if I were to analyze that, let me see. Yeah, see, your dominant function is your partner's inferior aspirational. So maybe he sucks at what you're good at, and he noticed that, and that attracted him to you, because it's literally it's his inferior, and his aspiration. It's what he wants to be like. So that could be something that actually pulls you two together. If he's really immature, it'll be something that he dislikes in you, and if he's mature, it's something he likes in you. So yeah, again, never be afraid. Stephen.
Yeah, it's probably a stupid question, but, like in the past, like with my Sylvia they were like young.
Mhm.
Is it similar to this?
No, that's actually more similar to Hums Wadsworth, which is what we were using in the military at the time. This does not work on children, really. I mean, it can, but kids are still developing their cognitive abilities, their cognitive functions. As a matter of fact, kids don't even have that third slot mastered yet. You know what I mean? The relief function. Like Daniel, you got your FI when you were a teen, roughly. So kids are going to be missing half their chart. They're going to suck at pretty much everything until they start getting older. When kids are kids. Now, if you try really hard, you can try to like see a little kid's dominant, try to figure out something they were born with. All right, there are some engineers out there who their parents would be like, yeah, when he was a little kid, he would get a hammer and break this and take it apart and try to put it back together again. Yeah, that kid was TI. That kid was introverted thinking. And there are some people who, oh yeah, they had a million friends immediately. Everyone loved them. They were probably extroverted feeling high. If they couldn't shut up or sit still, like me, it was extroverted intuition, most likely. So again, you can get a feel for kids, but the Soviets were probably doing aptitude type tests. They were probably testing IQs and stuff like that, and just kind of trying to break a prediction path. It's possible if this is like late Cold War, maybe they stole our info on Myers-Briggs that we were using in the CIA. Because if they were trying to do espionage, they probably got their hands on what we were using, and they would have used this. So maybe. I am not a Soviet spy, so I cannot tell you. But thank you for bringing it up, though, Stephen. Anybody? How much time are we working with here? Wow. Okay.
Any other questions? No? All right, well, anything on my Zoomies? Do y'all have any questions? Okay, I think they're good. Well, thank you, Nathaniel, for coming back and gracing us with your presence. The documents that you guys have are yours to keep. And if you go back into 16 personalities, a lot of that stuff, it really dissects it further. The whole point of doing it is to try to figure out what type of a leader you are, what your personality is, because personalities can change based on circumstances and things like that. You know, you could be one thing and then something traumatic happens and it can alter your personality, your way of thinking and all that good stuff. So this is, really more about being aware of yourself and how you interact with other people. Make sense? Okay. So thank you, Nathaniel, and thank you to McCole. McCole joined us online. We actually had Dr. Picker, he's not here anymore, but he joined online as well because he also teaches the Myers-Briggs to the healthcare management students. So, but if there's no other questions, you guys are welcome to use the rest of the time to complete homework and all that good stuff. Okay?
Yeah. And if you guys have one-on-one stuff, like maybe you have something in your type, but you don't feel comfortable, putting it on public display in front of the class, I'm going to just be chilling here. I'll be outside in like the general game room area. You can just come sit with me. I'll be on like the couches somewhere. So if you want to just talk about this, anything, I'll just give you whatever I've got off the top of my head. Again, this is my hobby. I enjoy doing this. Not going to judge you. I'm going to keep complete and utter secrets. And yeah, just it's all good. Anytime, y'all.
Something fun we did in cohort 2 to try to guess who the serial killer was in the group.
Yep.
Who is it in here?
Ooh, okay. For starters, raise your hand if you're an ISTJ. All right, that's easy. All right, well, easier. My gut says you, sir.
Which you, sir? In the blue and gray?
Yeah. What's your name, sir? Jacob.
I can see that. He's super quiet. Incognito, sneaked up on you.
Let me think. Yeah. You want me to start asking you questions and see how much you are with the rest of them, or you prefer not to? You don't care? ISTJ. All right. Now you sound like Brady. All right.
Destiny said it's always the quiet ones.
How angry do you get if something isn't clean? Like, and it's like your area, like your space that you care about it being clean? Everything has a spot? And you know where everything is? How much do you like being the center of attention? Not at all? Okay. How often do you shower? Yeah. Have you ever killed someone and then hid the body? Yeah, they do have that actually is how it starts. There's what's his name's dark triad, and the way it works is if you wet the bed for a long time, like up until you start hitting adolescence, just like in your sleep. The second one is if you burned things a lot as a child. If you found fire and you loved it and you would burn lots of things, that's the second one. And the third one is if you killed or tortured animals when you were a kid. That's the dark triad. And basically, if you have all three of those, then you tend to have more psychopathic tendencies. Also, if you had tons of behavioral issues when you were a kid, like if you would just get into fights like all the time, and those are kind of some of the signs there for psychopathic tendencies. And it tends to be psychopathic ISTJs that fall into the category of serial killer. And the reason why is because they're the people that can literally hold a secret for the rest of their lives. And they just kind of like have that. Anyone can get addicted to anything, by the way. That's important. There are some types that have predispositions to addictions. INFPs and ENTPs. I say INFPs, I mean ENTPs and ENFPs. Sorry, Georgia. They have a predisposition to possibly taking drugs or alcohol or being kind of like substance abusers. P types especially. But anyone can get addicted to anything, and being a serial killer is just someone who is addicted to killing systematically. And it tends to be ISTJs who do it the most because they're just able to get away with it and come up with a plan and execute it without getting caught immediately. You got a question, Georgia? You want to see what? All right, we'll do a hand raise if that's cool with everyone. Raise your hand if you're ISTJs. All right, let's see. All right, raise your hand if you're ISFJ. Yep. ESTJs. All right, Stephen. ESFJs. Oh, none this time. We had two. ESTPs. None. ISTPs. Maxine. ISFPs. ESFPs. Yep, Tia. ENTPs. Did y'all know Will? Big buff.
Oh, yeah.
Will was an ENTP. INTPs. I think we had some. Yeah, we had some on Zoom. I think. INFP. INTP. Yep. Two here. ENFPs. Yeah, Georgia. ENTJs. INTJs. Ooh, two. Those are rare.
I could see that.
I-
Your guys' personality is very close.
INFJs.
Got two online.
Got practically the two online.
Yeah.
Practically.
That's me and Brianna.
Got practically the rarest type, and you got like 6 of them in here. There's gonna be something for that. Oh, they must be developed. That's their summon. All right, and then lastly, ENFJs.
Crystal, you're the only one, Crystal.
Yeah. All right. Yeah.
She's over here dancing.
Yeah. In terms of type breakdown, the United States is more likely to have NFs. China is more likely to have S's. Japan is more likely to have NFs, but also J's. And like, I believe Russia and the Middle East have more NTs. And also like Egypt and like pieces of like Africa, where like The Alchemist took place, if you ever read that book, like in Algeria. And South America has more SPs, and Central America. So but they have like a whole like breakdown that you can just look up. They have like a world map, and they've taken like the results of everybody's. So yeah, if you're interested in like where people are.
Cool stuff.
Yeah.
All right, that's all that I have, unless you guys have any more questions. So I hope you guys had fun kind of dissecting and getting to know a little bit about this. And the rest of the time is yours to do homework and all that good stuff. Unless you want to talk to me, of course.
Yeah. Thank y'all again for being here. Appreciate y'all. Hope y'all enjoyed the presentation.